Hello, everyone. This is David. I do lots of little videos here. I like to cook. I like to share. I really don't like attention. I'm a very shy, introverted type of person. Even though looking at me and talking to me, but you wouldn't think that I was like that. But my best defense is my mouth. My worst thing I have about me is that sometimes I go off half cock. In other words, sometimes I say things impulsively without thinking things through, and I wind up having to pay the consequences for it. So many people out there are struggling with mental health, mental differences, and I don't like to call them illness. We all suffer through something or another. I've noticed a lot of the younger people going through a lot of depression, and it's very well understandable. I get it all the time. And why? Well, let's put it like this. Every child, once they get old enough, understand one plus one. They can add things up for themselves. Children are a lot smarter than we were. They are very social people, beings, and they're able to put things together faster and quicker than what we could. And because of that, they don't see an outcome to the situation they gotta face. I'm retired. I live off of Social Security. I don't have much money, but I have to learn to live off what I have. And my lifetime and things that I've gone through has trained me well because I've learned how to adjust and to adapt to what life has given me and what life is giving me. I can go from anywhere from living the way I do, and you can see that by the photos and pictures and things and stuff on the wall. This is my home. This is the longest I've ever been in one place in my whole entire life. I might not have a family that I can really call my own, even though I have got a son and a granddaughter that I know loves me in their own little ways, but that's their ways, that's all that they know. But as far as my near family and all, they don't know half the crap I went through. There's my older sisters, they understand what I went through. But my younger brother and sister, they have no idea about the tragedy and things that I went through before they were born. And no, it had nothing to do with my father, but everything to do with my older brother and my mother. You see, I dealt with some inner turmoil all my life. And one of those inner turmoils comes when I'm supposed to be sleeping upstairs or playing outside. And I come inside and I'm always quiet. I try not to disturb, when I was a little child, I tried not to disturb grown ups. I like to come in, sit down quietly, and behave myself. But in doing that so many times, I come in and I hear my mother and sister or my mother, great grandmother, or my grandmother, or aunt, all talking about how they wish today that I never was born. I hear this all the time. I heard this all the time. And many a times my sister and my mother demonstrated that they really did not want me to be born. You know, it doesn't take much for a child my age to learn if your mother and your older sister don't love you, you can't expect your brother to love you. And the things he did to me is unspeakable. Just as I did to my younger brother and sister was unspeakable, what he did was a whole lot worse than what I ever did to them. I had a little compassion for my younger brother and sister. I couldn't stand to hurt anybody, but I did. But the children today, they grow up so much faster than I did. They can take that one and one and make two. And they see their life and their situation, and it leads to a whole bunch of anxiety and turmoil going in there. Lots more than what I ever had. Thing is, psychologists, therapists, nurses, and doctors, and the mental health profession, they study books, they study procedures, they study classification and categorizing what people say. And there's little tricks that the doctor said to get you to see how you are. And they do this, and it's a little game. It's a little circle clock type of thing. You say one thing, and the patient says another thing. And if he doesn't say that, what he does say is something irrelevant to within that circle, and you just take them, even though you may skip a part, take them to the next part. And each one of those circles are based upon a category category that they put the patient in. And to me, it's the worst thing you can ever do. You stigmatize it. You take it and pass a judgment. And psychiatrist doctor will tell you, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. How am I going to treat them if I don't know how to put them? And sure, some of them, they need to be dealt with. They need for the doctor to understand what's going on with his patient, to understand what type of medication to give them. Because that's the first thing, is to help them become stable by using medication. And they base that medication on several different factors in your life, but sometimes the medication can have an adverse effect on the patient, and the patient doesn't know how to say anything. Because in all the life of people going to psychiatrists and doctors like this, they have learned not to trust. Therefore, they don't tell the doctor everything. They like to give a good general sense about what's going on emotionally with them, but they're not going to open up all the way. I've learned this because I've done this myself. Let you know, I've been in and out of psychiatrist hospitals, ever since I was about like 16 years old. I actually had problems before that. My mother knew it. I remember in the fifth grade that they tested me up one side and down the other mentally. And what the doctors come away with and people that study me, that I was just bored. That I needed something to challenge my mind. Yeah, I was bored, but I was only buying time. That's all I was doing. Just like my sister before me, the one just a little older than I am, she bought her time until she could get out of that situation. You know, if you're living in danger, you look for ways to escape. You bide your time. You sit back, keep your mouth shut until the time comes when you can bug out and go. No matter how much you try, sometimes there just ain't no going back. You just can't stay in that situation. That's something my younger brother and sister never learned. That the situation that was before them that I went through was very precarious situation. Like I said, I heard my mother tell my oldest sister and many others that she wished today that I had never been born. I remember my older sister and older brother crying while my mother was having a breakdown of some kind because she didn't, I don't know why, but she was screaming, yelling at everybody about this, about that. And I remember her pointing her finger at me saying, I just ought to take a knife and stab it right through you because that would just solve everybody's problem right then and there. You know, I had a very good memory. I still have a very good memory. I told my mother one time that I remember the ride to Nebraska on the bus. She looked at me and said, you couldn't have. You were only 2 years old. Well, yeah, I might have been 2 years old. But I also remember being in that home in Nebraska up on a top railing of a steps of a back of a house when my brother come up behind me while I was come up in front of me while I was climbing the steps and pushed me off where I landed flat on my back. And I know it was my brother that did this. But my mother said that my brother screamed that David fell off, and when she come and picked me up, they rushed me to the hospital because I had quit breathing. But on the way to the hospital, I started breathing, and come to be, I came out to be all right. But I remember my brother pushed me off of that high steps, and when I think about it now, it's on a second floor landing of a single unit house. And I don't know why my mother was there or what all this was about. All I know is I remember my brother pushing me off. Just like I remember being on that bus and riding it all the way over. I didn't know then where we were going, but I found out later from my mother we went to Nebraska. Why? My mother was running from her ex-husband, not from my father, from her ex. She was trying to go out there and get away from everybody to start over. And she got out there and couldn't make it. And I don't know where she got the money to come back home, but she got the money to come back home. And when she came back home, I think it all started up again. My father wasn't that smart. But he had his little quirks too. He kind of liked to be the center of attention, but I think that was part of his anxiety, part of his shyness. He spoke loudly and entertained and did things like that, only to hide his true nature of who he was. Now, there's been times, yeah, I saw my father get mad and beat the hell out of my mother. But then again, I've seen my mother take and nag men so relentlessly, so tirelessly, that they turn around and hit her. She wouldn't let up. I don't know why, but she would do that. And she didn't do my older brother, even though I found out from some people. See, we lived in these government apartments in this big metropolitan city, and I went back there and I visited. And the only reason why I went back there, reliving the memories. And I ran into some of the people that I used to run with as a kid. And I found out from one of them that we had to move from there because my older brother had been caught in bed with a younger girl that wasn't in elementary school. He was in bed and he had his hands all over her. So we had to pack up and leave within the middle of the night. He said we was there one evening and everybody in there was getting pissed, going to come out there and grab him up and beat the hell out of him. But before they could get there, we done gone. And come to find out, we had moved to another place, and I don't know why, but all of a sudden we had to pick up and move from there to go someplace else. And then that was all part of the thing about my brother. He had a hard time after that. He winded up going into the Job Corps. I'm not sure where he went. All I know, he went there, and something about him getting kicked out of there. He come home crying about this or that. But I also remember my mother and father talking about how they received a phone call from somebody that was in the high ranks of the Job Corps saying that my brother had a warrant for his arrest because he was found molesting some of the younger kids there. And we picked up and moved to another place. We were there for a couple of years, and something happened there, and I think we had to leave because of my father. But that's when my older sister, I think she got raped. And when she did, my father, being a father, even though it wasn't his child, he did the thing. He went after the guy that raped her, and from what I understand, he winded up about half dead. So when my father came home that evening, we packed up, put everything in the car, and we headed off from there. That's the life of my brother. And as we headed off from there, my brother took and went into the service. He had no choice. It's either go in the service, stay like he is, and get arrested. He went into the service. I'm giving you some little points about what was going on in my life. And the reason why I'm giving you these points is because I've lived a very hectic life. I've had mental problems, mental differences. I'm very well aware of everything that was happening around me. Matter of fact, my last wife that I had, I remember her as a child. Because she came over to see my sister just as clear as day. And when my last, and when I started describing to her that I knew it, she didn't believe me. So I took her back to the town where I was living at. Go back down through the street. She says, "That's a house." Yeah. I sat up on that porch. There was a porch swing there. And you come in there. I said, "You had this and that, and with my cousin-in-law like this and that was going on." She said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." Then I find out her mother was good friends with my aunt because they were in the same grade and they knew all these things that had happened to my mother before she left school. About how she claimed some guy raped her, and then they took her and the man that she claimed raped her. They took the man out, lynched him, beat the hell out of him, and I don't know if he lived or died, whatever, but they made her watch. Because I remember my aunt talking to my wife's mother at the time. My wife's mother said that it was her father that went out there with them, and she had to go watch them beat the crap out of this guy. So this guy got lynched. Said that my mother was there, and they made her watch the whole thing, and she didn't cry one tear during the whole time. Anyway, that's enough about me. You kind of see where I'm going at. Now, my younger brother and sister, they're going to say that I'm making this stuff up. No, I'm not making any of this up because I have to be honest with myself. I've ran from all this for all my life, and I've had to quit running. Yes, like I said, I did some terrible things to my younger brother and sisters, but not as bad as what was done to me. As I said that I might have caused the death of my mother. I don't know what happened to my mother because I was always running away. I had to escape. See, I have lots of voices going off in my head, always going off. And I still got lots of them going on up there. But I come to learn to cope with these things because I've done a little bit of studying about uh, where things come from and how the brain functions. By doing these studies, I've been able to turn my life around because I begin to understand and comprehend what's going on inside my head. Your doctor is going by a book. I've read those books. And each time that I read those books, I get the same thing. Those people are on the outside trying to look in. I'm on the inside looking out. I've got a distinct advantage. It's like the man on top of the hill fighting a war, and he's got a big army circling around him, but on top of the mountain, he has his little small army, and he has unlimited amount of weapons, and he can repel all the enemies down below. They can't reach him. He is on top of his mountain. That's the way I am on the inside. I see from the inside what's happened to me. They don't. They have a hard time relating to me because they have to take and categorize me into certain aspects so they know how to deal with me. They like to use these words, "I understand." They don't understand. They like to say, "Well, we see thousands of people all the time." I don't care. I could see 1,000 women giving pregnant, having babies, and going through birth and everything like that. Doesn't mean I will ever comprehend what it's like to give birth. I just seen it. And that's the same thing with all these doctors. They don't know because they're stuck in their heads with the books. I've had to go to the books and I found no answer in it. When you go to a psychiatrist's book and they say they really can't comprehend how all this gets started, well, it's like a doctor looking at a cut on a man's leg or waist, and it's always happening the same way each and every time. And all the doctors doing putting a bandage over it and treating the wound. But until they stop what the person's doing is getting the cuts on them, until they can see that, they don't know how to stop it. Until they can see these little things going on and comprehend it. But you take the doctor and the patient that's being cut, and the patient says, I don't know why I'm getting cut. And the doctor takes and borrows the patient's bill, puts it on him, and next thing you know, the doctor's getting a cut too. He knows what's going through, what's happening with the patient now. And what does he do? He tells the patient, gets rid of the belt, and your cut will stop. Because then the doctor can comprehend why he's getting cut. The doctor cannot go back and live my life to comprehend what I've gone through. Therefore, the only true resolution I have is to find out inside myself how all this takes place and what happens. And I did a lot of digging. I went all the way back to the very beginning of human evolution. I took and I mapped and I studied the brain as deeply as I can. I listened to all these little techniques and everything about the brain and where it comes from and everything. But it's in the development of a human body that I finally found the answer. And it's like anything else. There is always a starting point. There is always a beginning. That led me to my theories and different things go on. And my theory came up with inside of us, before we had the brain and the brainstem, we were just a mass of bacteria and enzymes brought together. We were not even human. We didn't start in the ocean and come out. No, we started on land near the water, and we started no more as a segment of DNA and bacteria coming together to form a mass. We didn't even have the intelligence to move on like we do now. But from our beginning, we had this mass. And this mass is like anything else, it wants to survive for a long time. And the first thing the thing does is learn to protect itself against the elements, any and all elements. And the first thing we did was we created skin. Then we, on the skin, we created a barrier that protected the skin. And then we learned how to digest, to absorb the energy, to make our life live longer. And all this stuff took place before we ever had a brain. And the first impulse that we ever had was the impulse to move, to get out of the way. Before then, we didn't even have the impulse to move out of the way. even though we knew there was dangers that could kill us. But once we learned and got the impulse to move, how we moved made just as much a difference as the way our development of our brain. And how did we move? We move according to the elements that was around us at the time. We may have been formed on a mass of water, but once we came to the land, we developed the skin and the hair, and we let ourselves be moved by nature itself, not with our own limbs, our own body. We didn't just slither, but we got moved, just like foam on the water gets moved around. And wherever we landed, we started, as we moved by the wind, by the waves, by the grass, by big other things that could carry us, and stuff like that. But wherever we landed, we learned to take and use that where we land as energy. And from there, we developed, uh, the very first thing we would develop was ways to make our own self move without the wind and all like that. More like snake or the worm. And even a worm, small as it has, it can sense danger. It doesn't have a full functioning brain like ours, like we do. It senses danger and knows to protect itself, just like that of a jellyfish. A jellyfish has a very rudimentary brain to gather nourishment for its body to grow and to defend itself. That's all it knows. That's all it needs to know. It doesn't need to know about reproduction because it never really dies. It gets old and all of a sudden it shrinks down to nothing, but all that nothing that's there gets washed back into, dissolved back into the sea, or if it's on land or whatever, it gets to, absorbed there and picked up and carried back into the water, and it becomes whole again. A jellyfish never really dies. And that's the reason why the propagation of the moon jellyfish or uh, tentacles on a jellyfish doesn't matter if they lose them or not because they just regenerate and grow more. But their first senses is to sense danger and to sense hunger. That's our first sense. And how they sense these things is through electrical charges and electrical pulses, negative, positive pulses. You develop the very same way. You have these electrical pulses, you have these electrical senses. And once I started realizing that, I realized that I'm like, I hate to say it, an antenna or satellite dish. I can receive signals from others. Those signals coming from others are put out the same way that I put them out. But I didn't know it. But in the way that I was brought up, I was brought up to sense danger at a very young age. Thus, I winded up being able to hear things, see things, and feel things at a higher capacity than others. That contributed to my thinking, my mental differences. It's not an illness. It's the same thing that you might hear about the Indian putting his head to the ground because by putting his head to the ground, he can hear the hoofs of horses or a buffalo moving. He can hear the rustling of leaves and things going on around him. He can hear. He can sense things. He don't have to be there. He can sense them. He just knows it. same thing that I developed, they already had. That's what happened in my head. All I could do was sense danger. I either acted or I reacted. That's all I had is just action and reaction. I did not know that some of the things that I was reacting to were just a mental differences that I was thinking, processing, electrical impulse. I didn't know how to differentiate from a child crying out for hold me and love me to a child saying, uh, teach me and let me go. I didn't know how to distinguish. I do now, nor did I know what empathy, care, or concern was. I had blocked those out of me for so long, I didn't know what they were. Unfortunately, I was married 3 times, and I hate to say it, but all 3 of those times, I didn't know how to love. I only knew to block it because if somebody said they loved me, but then I knew they were lying. They couldn't love me. How could they love me? I didn't love myself. I had to learn to readjust. So many times, I've seen differences in the world, and I had to adjust to all this stuff going on around me. But what has this got to do with it? All this that the young people are going through today? It's taken me 60 years to get where I'm at. Children today processing things at a higher rate than I did are falling into the same pattern that I did. I see it happening and I can't stop it. Nor can I get in there and interfere and say something because sometimes they just need to work things out for themselves, but I still can't do anything to help them. And I realize that. But I have got an ear. I can hear and I can feel and I'm here for them. But how's that going to help them? They're not going to go through the things that I did. They're not comprehend the things the way that I did. They've got lots of fear, more than what I had. I finally got tired of running, scared, and hiding all the time. I faced my fear. I said, damn the torpedoes, we're full steam ahead. I faced them. I'm still facing them, still having troubles and struggles. And I guess I will for the rest of my life. Even though I may be off the medication, I always know I get that safety net of being on the medication. If I need to, I know I had that as a safety net. And that's not a healthy thing. But either way, I have it, and I'll use it. It's my one clutch, my last hope. But for all the young people out there, do you think that you haven't got anybody that comprehends what you're going through? I do. You may not be honest with your doctor, but I get that. You know, you say the wrong thing with the doctor, they're going to lock you up in the hospital. I'm not a doctor. You can say what you want with me. I don't want you to kill yourself, but you don't need to do that anyway. I don't think you do. Because when you're in that suicidal thought, reaching for help, you don't want to kill yourself. It's when you're not reaching for yourself, and I don't know anything about that, but there ain't no way I can stop it. But you are adding things up in your life and you see the disaster of everything's going to be happening and you don't know how to stop it and you can't. There is no real hope with all this. The only hope that you have is that inside yourself. And that's the reason why I do new worship, because people need to have hope, and I want to bring them hope. You've learned a lot from me in this past few minutes, and by sharing it with you, it has helped me out a lot, and that's all that matters. Either way, I'm gonna sign off because I'm getting tired of talking. I'm gonna drink my little latte and sign off of here. And if anybody ever wants to join me, come and join me. We can do a live chat back and forth. And if you want to talk to me other than just live chat to me, you can. You can do a live chat to me anytime you want to. Anyway, I'll either give you a link to where you can join me on here. We can talk together one on one. You can ask me all the questions you want to fit me. And if what you're doing is going to help me, I really appreciate it. Then again, if I can help you, I really appreciate that too. By the way, this is Dana saying thank you and bye bye.